"Little girl, you should be serving coffee, not speaking for the president." These words from Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt would go down as the most catastrophic miscalculation in cable news history. Because Leavitt didn't just respond, she destroyed AOC so completely that security had to escort the sobbing Congresswoman off set before diving into the story. Comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest political showdowns. The CNN studio in Washington, D.C. was buzzing with anticipation on that fateful Thursday evening in March. Jake Tapper had promised his viewers a fascinating discussion between two of the youngest women in American politics. What he delivered instead was a public execution that would replay on social media for years to come. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez arrived at the studio 45 minutes early, her entourage in tow. The 34-year-old Congresswoman from New York's 14th District had become the undisputed queen of progressive politics, with 13 million Twitter followers and a media presence that rivaled seasoned politicians. AOC had grown accustomed to dominating every room she entered. Her trademark red lipstick was perfectly applied. Her designer blazer, a $3,500 piece that had caused its own minor scandal, pressed to perfection. Remember, her chief of staff, Ariel Ekblad, briefed her in the green room. "Leavitt is just 27. She's inexperienced. Hit her on her age, her lack of government experience before Trump. Make her look like what she is, a child playing dress-up." In the White House, AOC smirked, checking her reflection one more time. "Please, I've been destroying Republicans since she was in college. This will be easier than my bartending shifts." The confidence was typical AOC. Since unseating Joe Crowley in 2018, she'd built a reputation as a fierce debater who could reduce opponents to stammering messes. With her quick wit and camera presence, her Green New Deal might have been mocked by conservatives, but her ability to command attention was undeniable. She'd taken down CEOs in congressional hearings, embarrassed senior Republicans on Twitter, and become the face of young progressive America. But tonight, she was about to face someone she'd gravely underestimated. Down the hall, Karoline Leavitt sat alone in a smaller green room, her preparation starkly different. No entourage, no makeup team. Just her and a leather-bound notebook filled with handwritten notes. At 27, she was the youngest White House press secretary in history, a fact her critics never let her forget. The blonde New Hampshire native had been dismissed by the mainstream media as Trump's sorority girl spokeswoman, but those who'd watched her briefings knew better. Leavitt had a photographic memory and had spent the last 3 days preparing for this moment. She'd studied every one of AOC's interviews, memorized her voting record, and most importantly, discovered something that AOC's team had desperately tried to bury. Her phone buzzed, a text from President Trump himself. "Destroy her, Karoline. Show them what New Hampshire granite is made of." The differences between the two women were stark. AOC, despite her working-class rhetoric, now lived in a luxury apartment in Navy Yard, drove a Tesla, and had become everything she'd once claimed to oppose. Leavitt, despite working in the White House, still drove a used Honda Civic and lived with roommates to save money. One had become intoxicated with fame, the other remained focused on the work. At 9 p.m. sharp, Jake Tapper opened the show. The set was CNN's standard, a sleek desk, dramatic lighting, the Capitol dome visible through the windows behind them. But the energy was anything but standard. Even the camera operators could sense something significant was about to happen. "Good evening. I'm Jake Tapper. Tonight, a special edition of The Lead as we bring together two of the youngest women in American politics. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Democrat from New York, and Karoline Leavitt, White House press secretary for President Trump. Ladies, welcome." The two women sat across from each other, the contrast immediately apparent. AOC leaned back in her chair, a practiced casual confidence that said she owned the space. Leavitt sat straight, alert, her blue eyes focused with an intensity that made some viewers unconsciously lean forward. "Let's start with the state of political discourse," Tapper began. "Congresswoman, You've been critical of the Trump administration's tone. Your thoughts? AOC launched into her prepared remarks with typical flair. Jake, what we're seeing from this administration is unprecedented. They've put a 27-year-old girl, and I use that term deliberately, as their spokesperson. When I was 27, I was bartending, learning about real American struggles. Ms. Leavitt here was, what, running Instagram accounts? The insult was delivered with AOC's trademark smirk, the one that had become a gif shared millions of times by her supporters. But Leavitt didn't flinch. She made a small note in her pad, her expression unchanged. The Trump administration, AOC continued, warming to her theme, thinks they can put a pretty young face in front of cameras and distract from their failures. But Americans aren't fooled by sorority girl politics. Tapper turned to Leavitt. Your response? Leavitt looked directly at AOC, not at Tapper or the cameras. Her voice was calm, measured. Congresswoman, I appreciate you bringing up our ages. You're right, when you were 27, you were bartending. When I was 27, which is now, I'm serving as the youngest White House press secretary in history. Before that, I was communications director for Congresswoman Elise Stefanik. Before that, I worked on successful campaigns while maintaining a 3.9 GPA at St. Anselm College. She paused, letting that sink in. You mentioned learning about real Americans while bartending. I learned about real Americans growing up in a middle-class family. In New Hampshire, working at my family's ice cream stand and putting myself through college. The difference is, I didn't need to pretend to be working class for political points. The first hit landed. AOC's smirk faltered slightly. She hadn't expected Leavitt to come back so directly. Now you're worth over $1 million, Leavitt continued. You wear $3,500 blazers while claiming to represent the poor. You drive a $60,000 Tesla while attacking others for their privilege. So when you call me a girl, I have to ask, is that what you call all young women who accomplish more than you did at their age? The studio fell silent. Even Tapper seemed momentarily stunned by the directness of the counterattack. AOC's face flushed, her carefully applied makeup unable to hide her anger. Excuse me? AOC leaned forward, her voice rising. I've accomplished more for working Americans than you ever will. The Green New Deal failed to get a single vote in the Senate. Leavitt interrupted smoothly. Even Democrats wouldn't support it. Your Amazon deal cost New York 25,000 jobs. Your approval rating in your own district, 31%, one of the lowest in Congress. She pulled out a sheet of paper. Should I continue? Because I have your entire legislative record here, or lack thereof, in 3 terms. You've passed exactly 1 bill, renaming a post office. I've been press secretary for 6 months and helped communicate policies that created 100,000 jobs. AOC's hands were trembling now. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She was supposed to be the sharp one, the witty one who destroyed Republicans, with facts and logic. But Leavitt had come prepared with something AOC hadn't expected, actual facts. You don't know what you're talking about. AOC snapped. You're just a mouthpiece, reading whatever Trump tells you to say. Leavitt's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. She reached into her folder and pulled out another document. Speaking of being a mouthpiece, Congresswoman, would you like to discuss your chief of staff's financial records? The ones showing he funneled $885,000 from your campaign to private companies he controlled? AOC went pale. That investigation had been quietly settled, the records sealed. How did Leavitt have them? That's been resolved, AOC stammered. Resolved by paying a fine and avoiding prosecution, Leavitt clarified. Just like your unpaid tax warrant from 2012. Just like your failure to disclose gifts from lobbyists. You call me young and inexperienced, but I've never had an ethics investigation. Can you say the same? The hits kept coming, each one precisely targeted. Leavitt had done her homework, and it showed. Every attack AOC had planned was turned back on her with devastating effectiveness. Let's talk about experience, Leavitt continued. You said I should be serving coffee. Interesting choice of words from someone who claims to support working women. But let's examine our experience. You were a bartender who won a casting call. Yes, Congresswoman. We all know about the Justice Democrats audition process. I worked my way up through competitive campaigns, earned my position through merit. Not because I had the right demographic profile for a progressive group's social experiment. How dare you? AOC started, but Leavitt wasn't finished. You've spent 3 terms in Congress tweeting and streaming on Twitch. I've spent 6 months helping craft and communicate policies that actually became law. You play among us with teenagers. Online, I briefed the President of the United States. So who exactly lacks experience? Tapper tried to regain control. Ladies, but AOC had lost all composure. Her voice cracked as she nearly shouted, "You're nothing but a Trump puppet. A pretty blonde they parade around to." To what? Leavitt's voice remained deadly calm. Finish the sentence, Congresswoman. Show America what you really think about young women who disagree with you. Because it sounds like you're saying a woman can't be intelligent and accomplished if she's young and blonde. That's interesting coming from someone who claims to be a feminist. The trap was perfectly sprung. AOC realized too late what she'd walked into. She'd been about to say something that would have exposed her as exactly the kind of person she claimed to oppose, someone who judged women by their appearance rather than their accomplishments. That's not. AOC was floundering now, her usual eloquence deserting her. You know what the difference between us really is? Leavitt asked, her voice taking on an almost gentle tone that somehow made it more devastating. You've built your entire brand on being young and attacking others. But what happens when you're not the youngest anymore? What happens when someone younger, more prepared, and more accomplished comes along? You do exactly what the old guard did to you. You try to diminish them based on their age and appearance. You've become everything you claim to fight against. That's when it happened. The tears started forming in AOC's eyes, not from sadness, but from pure rage and humiliation. She'd been exposed on national television, her hypocrisy laid bare for millions to see. You want to talk about serving coffee? Leavitt delivered the killing blow. At least when you were serving coffee, you were serving others. Now you only serve yourself, your brand, your fame, your million-dollar net worth built on the backs of the constituents you've failed. I may be 27, but I know the difference between service and self-service. Apparently, at 34. You still don't. The tears were flowing freely now. AOC's perfectly applied makeup was running, creating dark streaks down her cheeks. She looked around, desperately, as if searching for an escape route. Her chief of staff was visible off camera, frantically gesturing to Tapper to cut to commercial. But Leavitt wasn't done. She pulled out one final document. One last thing, Congresswoman. You talk about my age and inexperience, but did you know that at 27, Thomas Jefferson was writing the Declaration of Independence? At 27, Joan of Arc had already saved France. At 27, Mark Zuckerberg had built a billion-dollar company. And yes, at 27, I'm serving as White House press secretary. What matters isn't age, it's what you do with your time. And based on your record, you've wasted yours. That broke AOC completely. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. She couldn't finish the sentence. The woman who'd never been at a loss for words was completely speechless. Congresswoman, Tapper stood as well, genuinely concerned. Are you all right? But AOC was already moving toward the exit, her hand covering her face as sobs racked her body. The cameras caught every moment, the tears, the ruined makeup, the complete breakdown of someone who'd thought themselves invincible. We need to. Commercial now, Tapper managed, as chaos erupted in the studio. As CNN cut to break, Leavitt remained seated, calmly organizing her papers. She hadn't raised her voice once. She hadn't resorted to personal attacks beyond responding to AOC's own. She had simply come prepared with facts, delivered them with precision, and let AOC destroy herself. The clip hit social media before the commercial break was even over. #AcreSonkin exploded across Twitter. The video was everywhere. AOC calling Leavitt a little girl, followed by Leavitt's systematic destruction, ending with AOC fleeing in tears. Conservative Twitter was ecstatic. Karoline Leavitt just ended AOC's whole career, tweeted Charlie Kirk. This is what happens when Instagram politics meets actual competence, added Ben Shapiro. But even neutral observers were stunned by the thoroughness of AOC's defeat. "I've never seen anything like this," tweeted political analyst Amy Walter. AOC walked into a buzzsaw. Leavitt was prepared for every attack and had receipts for everything. The memes came fast and furious. AOC's tearful face became the new crying. Jordan videos set Leavitt's takedown to dramatic music went viral. One particularly popular TikTok showed the exchange with health bars above each woman's head. AOC's depleting with each Leavitt response until it hit zero when she fled. In the CNN control room, producers were in crisis mode. AOC had locked herself in a bathroom, still sobbing. Her staff was threatening to sue the network for something they hadn't figured out what yet. The show still had 20 minutes to fill. Tapper returned from commercial, professional as always but clearly shaken. "Ladies and gentlemen, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez has had to leave due to a medical issue. We'll continue with Ms. Leavitt." For the remaining time, Leavitt was gracious in victory. She didn't gloat or pile on. Instead, she used the time to articulate Trump administration policies clearly and effectively. It was a masterclass in communication that even CNN's liberal audience had to respect. "I want to say something," Leavitt concluded. "I don't take any joy in what happened tonight. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez is clearly passionate about her beliefs. But passion without preparation, attacks without substance, that's not leadership. It's performance. And the American people deserve better than performance art from their elected officials." As the show ended, Jake Tapper looked directly at the camera. "In 20 years of broadcasting, I've never seen an interview end like that. This will certainly be analyzed for days to come." He had no idea how right he was. Within hours, the political world was in upheaval. AOC's office released a statement claiming she'd had an anxiety attack brought on by Leavitt's harassment, but nobody was buying it. The video clearly showed AOC as the aggressor, who'd been thoroughly out-prepared and out-classed. Democratic leadership was furious. Nancy Pelosi, watching from her office, immediately called an emergency meeting. How could she be so unprepared? She demanded of her staff. She walked into that studio and handed Republicans a gift that will last through the next election. Chuck Schumer was even more direct in a leaked phone call. "AOC just gave every Republican in the country ammunition. That crying face will be in every ad for the next 2 years." But the real damage was in AOC's own district, her constituents, many of whom had supported her as a fighter for the working class. Watch their representative break down because a younger woman had exposed her hypocrisy. Local community boards that had endorsed her began reconsidering. The Democratic Socialists of America issued a statement distancing themselves from her ageist and sexist attacks on another young woman. AOC tried to recover with a Twitter thread the next day, claiming Leavitt had ambushed her with Republican dark money opposition research. But the ratio was brutal. Even her usual supporters couldn't defend her performance. "You called her a little girl who should be serving coffee," one former fan tweeted. "Then she served you facts and you ran away crying. That's not an ambush, that's karma." The late-night comedians, usually AOC allies, couldn't resist the material. AOC found out what happens when you bring tweets to a fact fight. Stephen Colbert joked. Even Saturday Night Live, which had portrayed AOC heroically for years, ran a devastating sketch with AOC crying while Leavitt calmly read facts from index cards. The political implications were immediate. 3 primary challengers announced within a week, all citing AOC's embarrassing meltdown and failure to represent the district effectively. Her fundraising, usually robust from small donors nationwide, plummeted. The merchandise sales that had funded much of her operation, those taxed the rich sweatshirts and AOC coffee mugs, dried up almost overnight. But perhaps the most damaging development came from within her own office. 3 senior staffers resigned within days, not wanting to be associated with what was being called the worst political cell phone in modern history. One, speaking anonymously to Politico, revealed the chaos behind the scenes. She didn't prepare at all. She thought she could wing it like she always does. When Karoline started hitting back with facts, AOC just lost it. The crying wasn't strategic, She was genuinely broken by being exposed like that. A week later, Leavitt was asked about the incident during a White House press briefing. Her response was characteristically measured. "I went on CNN to discuss policy. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez chose to make it personal, attacking my age and suggesting I should be serving coffee instead of serving my country. I simply responded with facts about our respective records. I hope she's doing well and wish her the best." The grace and victory only made AOC look worse by comparison. Here was the little girl showing more maturity and class than the established congresswoman. The incident became a case study in political preparation and the dangers of underestimating opponents. Harvard's Kennedy School analyzed it in a paper titled The Leavitt-AOC Debate: When Preparation Meets Hubris. The conclusion was damning for AOC. Representative Ocasio-Cortez's failure to prepare, combined with her reliance on personal attacks rather than substantive arguments, created a perfect storm of political self-destructs. Republican strategists couldn't believe their luck. The video became a staple at GOP events, played to thunderous applause. "This is what happens when social media politics meets serious governance," became a common refrain. Leavitt, meanwhile, saw her star rise even higher. Speaking invitations poured in. Her social media following quadrupled. There was even talk of her running for office herself. "I'm focused on my current job," she said when asked. But Republican insiders were already imagining her future. "She's 27 and just took down one of the biggest names in Democratic politics," one senior GOP senator said. "Imagine what she'll be capable of at 37. For AOC, the road back seemed impossible. Her brand had been built on being young, fierce, and unbeatable in verbal combat. Leavitt had destroyed all three pillars in less than half an hour. The woman who'd made her name, taking down powerful figures in hearings, had been taken down herself, and by someone 7 years younger. The final humiliation came 3 weeks later. AOC was scheduled to appear at a major progressive conference, but organizers quietly uninvited her. Her presence would be a distraction, they said diplomatically. The real reason was simpler. Nobody wanted to be associated with such a spectacular failure. In the end, the exchange became more than just a viral moment. It marked a changing of the guard in American politics. The social media generation that AOC represented, all style, no substance, quick with accusations but light on facts, had met its match in someone like Leavitt, who combined youth with preparation, energy with discipline. Political historians would later mark it as the moment when performative politics met its limits. You could build a following on Twitter, become famous on Instagram, and trend on TikTok. But when the cameras were rolling and someone came prepared with facts, all the followers in the world couldn't save you from yourself. AOC never fully recovered. She finished her term quietly, avoiding major media appearances. Her primary challenger, citing her inability to effectively represent the district after her public humiliation, won by 15 points. The woman who'd entered Congress as the future of progressive politics left it as a cautionary tale about the dangers of believing your own hype. Karoline Leavitt continued as press secretary, her reputation enhanced by her calm demolition of AOC. She never gloated, never did victory laps. She simply continued doing her job with the same preparation and professionalism that had served her so well that night on CNN. Years later, when asked about the incident in a retrospective interview, Leavitt was reflective. "I didn't go on CNN to end anyone's career. I went to defend the administration and discuss policy. But when someone attacks you personally, questions your right to be there based on your age and appearance, you have two choices: accept it or respond with facts. I chose facts." She paused, then added, "The lesson isn't that I won or she lost. It's that in politics, as in life, preparation beats performance every time. You can't tweet your way through a serious debate. You can't Instagram your way past hard questions. And you certainly can't build a lasting career on attacking others for the very things you're guilty of yourself." The interview clip went viral too. A final reminder of the night when Karoline Leavitt didn't just defeat Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She exposed the hollow nature of an entire political movement, built on social media celebrity rather than substantive achievement. It was the night performance politics died on live television, brought down by a 27-year-old with a notebook full of facts and the calm confidence to use them. As for the tears that gave the incident its name, they became the most expensive tears in political history, costing AOC her career, her reputation, and her future, all because she made the fatal mistake of underestimating someone based on nothing more than age and appearance. In the end, the little girl she'd mocked had served her something far more devastating than coffee, a dose of reality that proved impossible to swallow. The morning after the CNN disaster, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez woke up in her Navy Yard luxury apartment to a nightmare that wouldn't end. Her phone, usually her greatest weapon, had become an instrument of torture. The notifications were endless. Mentions, tags, memes, all documenting her complete humiliation. She'd turned off all alerts at 3 a.m., but the silence was somehow worse. Her longtime boyfriend, Riley Roberts, brought her coffee, ironic given her attack on Leavitt about serving coffee. "Maybe you should stay off social media for a while," he suggested gently. AOC laughed bitterly. "Stay off social media? That's like telling me to stop breathing. Social media is my career, or was." The numbers were catastrophic. Her Twitter followers, which had steadily grown for 5 years, were dropping by thousands per hour. The ratio on her attempted explanation tweet was the worst she'd ever seen. 50,000 negative responses to only 2,000 likes. Even her die-hard supporters were struggling to defend her at the Capitol. AOC's arrival was met with unusual silence. Normally, reporters clustered around her, eager for a quote. Today, they kept their distance, some actually turning away. She could hear the whispers, see the smirks. Everyone had seen the video. Everyone had seen her cry. In her office, her staff was in crisis mode. Chief of Staff Ariel Ekblad had called an emergency meeting, but half the staff hadn't shown up. Those who did looked shell-shocked. "We need a strategy," Ekblad said, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. Maybe a sympathetic interview with a friendly outlet. MSNBC would. "No more interviews." AOC cut her off. "Not until this dies down." "With respect, Congresswoman," her communications director interjected. "This isn't going to die down. The video has 45 million views and climbing. It's been memed into oblivion. We need to confront this head-on." AOC's eyes flashed with the anger. That had gotten her into this mess. Confront what? That I was ambushed by a Trump propagandist with opposition research. The room fell silent. Even her most loyal staffers couldn't pretend that's what had happened. They'd all watched Leavitt calmly present fact after fact while AOC fell apart. "Maybe," her policy director said carefully, "we should focus on legislative work for a while. Show substance over style." It was the right advice, but it came too late. AOC had built her entire brand on style, on being the young, social media savvy politician who could destroy opponents. With a tweet. Without that, who was she meanwhile? At the White House, Karoline Leavitt was handling her newfound fame with characteristic discipline. President Trump had called her into the Oval Office first thing in the morning. "Karoline, that was beautiful, beautiful. You destroyed her, completely destroyed her. Did you see her cry? I've never seen anything like it. Thank you, Mr. President. I was just presenting facts." "Facts, yes, but the way you did it." Trump leaned back in his chair, a huge grin on his face. "You know what I'm going to call you? The Terminator, because you terminated her career." Leavitt smiled politely, though internally she cringed at the nickname. "I prefer to focus on our policy achievements, sir. Smart, very smart. Stay humble. But between us, that was the greatest political assassination I've ever seen, and I've seen them all, believe me." The contrast between the two camps couldn't have been starker. While AOC hid from the media, Leavitt conducted her regular press briefing with her usual professionalism. The press corps, many of whom had dismissed her as too young for the job, now looked at her with newfound respect. She'd taken down one of the media's darlings without breaking a sweat. "Karoline," one reporter asked, "any response to Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez's claim that you ambushed her with opposition research?" Leavitt's response was measured. "I went on CNN with publicly available information, voting records, financial disclosures, news reports. If knowing facts about your own record constitutes an ambush, then perhaps the Congresswoman needs to examine that record more carefully. The briefing room erupted in laughter. Even from typically hostile reporters, it was another perfectly delivered blow, making AOC look even more unprepared and delusional. Back in New York, AOC's district was in turmoil. Her district office in the Bronx, usually bustling with constituents and activists, was nearly empty. The few who came were angry, not supportive. "You embarrassed us," one longtime supporter, Maria Gonzalez, told AOC during a tense meeting. "We elected a fighter, not someone who cries when challenged by a younger woman. She attacked me," AOC began. "No, Mija. You attacked her, called her a little girl, said she should serve coffee. Then she showed you up with facts, and you ran away crying. My 16-year-old daughter saw it. You know what she said? 'Mom, I thought AOC was supposed to be strong.'" The criticism from her own constituents cut deeper than any Republican attack. These were the people who'd believed in her, who'd seen her as their voice in Washington. Now they saw her as an embarrassment. The Democratic establishment, which had always been wary of AOC, moved quickly to distance themselves. Chuck Schumer, asked about the incident, said simply, "All members of Congress should conduct themselves with dignity and preparation." It was a clear rebuke. Nancy Pelosi was even less subtle in a private meeting with leadership. She set back young women in politics by a decade. "Crying because someone challenged you with facts, this isn't what we fought for." The Progressive Caucus, AOC's natural base of support, was split. Some tried to defend her, but others saw an opportunity. Representative Ro Khanna, ambitious and sensing weakness, began making moves to position himself as the new face of young progressives. "We need to be serious about governance," he told Politico in a barely veiled shot at AOC. "Social media is a tool, not a substitute for policy knowledge." But the most devastating blow came from an unexpected source. Senator Bernie Sanders, AOC's political godfather who'd endorsed her original run, was asked about the incident on Vermont Public Radio. "I haven't seen the video," he said, though everyone knew he had. "But I will say this, in politics, you must be prepared. You must know the facts. You cannot attack someone personally and then be surprised when they respond with substance. That's not progressive. That's not helpful for AOC." Sanders' mild rebuke felt like a knife in the back. He'd essentially confirmed what everyone was thinking. She'd been exposed as a fraud, all style and no substance. The primary challengers smelled blood in the water. Within 2 weeks, 3 credible Democrats had announced runs against her. The most formidable was Michael Blake, a former state assemblyman with deep roots in the Bronx. The 14th District deserves a representative who fights with facts, not tweets, Blake announced at his campaign launch. Someone who builds coalitions, not brands. Someone who serves the district, not their own celebrity. AOC tried to fight back on her preferred battlefield, social media. But even there, she'd lost her magic touch. Her attempted comeback tweet, "They fear strong women who speak truth to power," was mercilessly mocked. "You literally cried when a woman 7 years younger than you stated facts." One viral response read, "That's not speaking truth to power. That's throwing a tantrum." The memes were relentless. AOC crying became the go-to image for any political defeat. "When you tweet all day but someone brings receipts" became a popular caption. Even worse, Leavitt's calm demolition was turned into inspirational content. How to win a debate with facts not feelings compilations flooded YouTube. 3 weeks after the CNN incident, AOC attempted a comeback with a town hall in her district. It was a disaster. Half the room was empty, unprecedented for someone who usually packed venues. Those who came were hostile. "You made us look stupid," one constituent said during the Q&A. "My Republican co-workers play that video and laugh at me for supporting you." AOC tried to deflect. "This is about right-wing media manipulation." "No." Another constituent interrupted. "This is about you being unprepared and immature. That girl Leavitt showed more class at 27 than you have at 34. The town hall ended early when AOC, fighting back tears again, claimed she wasn't feeling well. The optics were terrible, once again. She was running from confrontation. Her legislative work, never strong to begin with, completely stalled. Other representatives didn't want to co-sponsor bills with her, fearing the association would hurt them. Her amendments were voted down by wider margins than ever. She'd become toxic, even to her own party. The financial impact was severe. AOC's merchandise sales, which had funded much of her political operation, dropped 80%. Who wanted to wear a shirt supporting someone who'd been so thoroughly humiliated? Her small-dollar fundraising, once the envy of politicians nationwide, dried up. Why donate to someone who clearly couldn't compete at the highest level? Speaking invitations, once plentiful and lucrative, disappeared. Universities that had paid 5 figures for her to speak quietly canceled. Progressive organizations found other speakers for their events. The woman who'd been the face of young progressive politics was being erased in real time. Meanwhile, Karoline Leavitt's star continued to rise. She handled her newfound fame with grace, never gloating, always redirecting attention to policy and the Trump administration's achievements. Republican organizations begged her to speak at their events. Conservative media couldn't get enough of her. But Leavitt remained focused on her job. "I'm the press secretary, not a celebrity," she told colleagues who encouraged her to capitalize on the moment. The job comes first. This professional approach only enhanced her reputation. While AOC had chased fame, Leavitt chased competence. The contrast wasn't lost on political observers. "Leavitt represents a new generation of conservative women," wrote columnist Molly Hemingway. "Prepared, professional, and devastating when challenged. AOC represents the old social media politics, all performance, no substance." The Atlantic published a lengthy analysis titled "The Night Social Media Politics Died," examining how Leavitt's fact-based approach had exposed the hollowness of AOC's brand for years. "We've been told that social media savvy and viral moments were the future of politics." AOC embodied this theory, young, charismatic, with a gift for the viral clapback. But when faced with someone equally young but infinitely more prepared, the entire edifice collapsed. Leavitt didn't need clever tweets or Instagram stories. She had facts, preparation, and the discipline to use them effectively. As summer arrived, AOC's political death spiral accelerated. A poll showed her underwater in her own district for the first time, to 38% approval, 50% disapproval. Among voters under 30, once her base, the numbers were even worse. They'd moved onto other young politicians who could actually deliver. Her colleagues in Congress actively avoided her. The squad, once a powerful force, fractured as other members distanced themselves from their radioactive colleague. Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib stopped appearing with her at events. Even Ayanna Pressley, her closest ally, kept her distance. "AOC's become a liability," a Democratic strategist told The Hill. "Association with her is political poison." She went from the future of the party to a cautionary tale in one CNN interview. "The primary campaign was brutal," Michael Blake hammered her relentlessly on her lack of achievements, her celebrity obsession, and most of all, the CNN debacle. "My opponent spent more time streaming video games than studying legislation," Blake said at a debate AOC barely attended. When challenged by someone who'd done their homework, she cried and ran. "Is that who you want representing you?" AOC's campaign tried everything, bringing in Bernie Sanders, who gave a lukewarm endorsement, playing up her working-class roots, which rang hollow given her designer wardrobe, even attempting to portray herself as a victim of sexism, which backfired given she'd attacked Leavitt for being young and female. Nothing worked. On primary night, the results were decisive. Blake 57%, AOC 38%, with minor candidates taking the rest. The woman who'd shocked the political world by defeating Joe Crowley was now herself defeated, and far more decisively. Her concession speech was painful to watch. Gone was the confident, fierce warrior for progressive causes. In her place stood a diminished figure, reading prepared remarks in a monotone voice. "I congratulate Mr. Blake on his victory," she said, not making eye contact with the camera. "I wish him well in representing the district. No thank you to supporters. No rallying cry for the future. No promise to continue the fight. Just defeat." Total and complete, the postmortems were savage. AOC, a cautionary tale of political celebrity, read the New York Times analysis. How tweet-storm politics met its match, declared the Wall Street Journal. Even sympathetic outlets couldn't spin it positively. She was never a serious legislator, wrote a columnist for The Nation. She was an influencer who happened to win an election. When forced to compete on substance rather than social media engagement, she crumbled. Karoline Leavitt, asked about AOC's defeat, remained gracious. I wish former Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez well in her future endeavors. Public service is challenging, and I respect anyone who steps into the arena. But privately, Republican strategists were ecstatic. Leavitt had not only defeated AOC in debate, she'd effectively ended the entire model of politics AOC represented. No longer could young politicians assume social media prowess was enough. Preparation, knowledge, and substance were back in fashion. AOC's post-Congress life was a series of failed attempts to remain relevant. A podcast lasted 6 episodes before low download numbers killed it. A book deal was quietly canceled when pre-orders came in disastrously low. MSNBC, which might have offered her a contributor role, passed after focus groups reacted negatively to her appearances. She tried returning to bartending, a symbolic gesture, meant to reconnect with her roots, but even that became a mockery when customers recognized her and played the CNN video on their phones. She lasted one shift before quitting. Instagram, once her kingdom with millions of followers, became a ghost town. Posts that once got hundreds of thousands of likes now barely cracked 10,000. The comment sections were brutal, endless references to crying, to Leavitt, to serving coffee. A year after the CNN incident, New York Magazine ran a "Where Are They Now?" piece on AOC. They found her living in a modest apartment in Queens, working for a nonprofit focused on social media training for activists. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The woman who'd been mastered by social media politics was now teaching others how to use it. I learned a lot from that experience, she told the interviewer, clearly still haunted by that night. Preparation matters, facts matter. You can't just wing it at the highest levels. When asked if she'd consider running for office again, her response was telling. I think that chapter of my life is closed. Meanwhile, Karoline Leavitt continued to excel as press secretary, earning respect from even hostile media for her preparation and professionalism. Republican recruiters begged her to run for office, seeing her as the future of the party. She demurred, focused on her current role, but few doubted her political future was bright. At Harvard's Kennedy School, the Leavitt-AOC debate became required viewing in political communication classes. Professor David King used it as a masterclass in preparation versus personality. Notice how Leavitt never raises her voice, never gets personal except in direct response to AOC's attacks. She has facts at her fingertips, documents ready, specific, numbers memorized. AOC has talking points and attitude. In modern politics, talking points aren't enough anymore. Students studied Leavitt's technique, the calm delivery, the strategic use of pauses, the way she let AOC's attacks create openings for devastating counters. It was technical excellence meeting emotional amateurism, and the result was predictable. The broader impact on progressive politics was significant. The Democratic Socialists of America conducted a postmortem on what went wrong, concluding that they'd prioritized social media metrics over substantive policy knowledge. New candidate training emphasized preparation and facts over viral moments and clever tweets. The AOC model is dead, one DSA organizer admitted privately. We created a monster, someone who thought being good at Twitter made her good at politics. Leavitt exposed that lie brutally. Young progressive candidates distanced themselves from AOC's style, emphasizing their policy knowledge and legislative experience, rather than their social media following. The age of the political influencer, which AOC had embodied, came to an abrupt end. Conservative women, inspired by Leavitt's example, entered politics in record numbers. They studied her methods, preparation, professionalism, and the ability to remain calm under attack. Be like Karoline became an informal motto among young Republican women. The media landscape changed too. cable news producers, burned by the AOC meltdown, began prioritizing guests who could handle substantive debate over those who just delivered good sound bites. The viral moment became less important than sustained, factual argument. Political scientists would later identify the CNN debate as a pivotal moment in American politics. Dr. Sarah Morrison of Georgetown University wrote in her definitive analysis, "The Leavitt-AOC confrontation marked the end of what we might call the performance politics era. For nearly a decade, politicians had prioritized social media engagement, viral moments, and personal branding over traditional political skills like policy knowledge and debate preparation. AOC was the apex of this trend, a politician more influencer than legislator." Leavitt's systematic dismantling of her exposed the fundamental weakness of this approach. You cannot tweak your way through a serious policy debate. You cannot Instagram your way past informed opposition. The tools that made AOC famous became irrelevant when faced with someone who had done their homework. 5 years later, at a political conference on the future of digital politics, the CNN incident came up during a panel discussion. One of the panelists, a young political strategist, summed up the lasting impact. "That night taught us that authenticity without competence is just incompetence. Being young and passionate isn't enough. Being social media savvy isn't enough. You need to know your stuff, because eventually, you'll face someone like Karoline Leavitt who does." AOC, by then completely out of public life, was working as a social media consultant for small nonprofits. Friends said she never watched political news anymore. The trauma of her public humiliation still too fresh. She'd gone from the future of American politics to a cautionary tale in less than 30 minutes of television. The final irony came when Leavitt, after a successful tenure as press secretary that eventually run for office, she won her New Hampshire congressional race by 15 points, running on a platform of preparation over performance, substance over soundbites. In her victory speech, she never mentioned AOC by name, but everyone knew the subtext. "We've shown that voters want representatives who do their homework, who come prepared, who respect them enough to know the facts," Leavitt told the cheering crowd. "The era of political theater is over. The era of political competence has begun." Back in New York, AOC watched the victory speech alone in her apartment. For a moment, the old fire flickered. She wanted to tweet something cutting, something that would go viral. But she stopped herself. She'd learned, too late, that viral moments were no match for genuine preparation. She closed her laptop and went to bed early. Tomorrow she had a meeting with a small environmental group that needed help with their Instagram strategy. It wasn't Congress, it wasn't the national stage, but it was work. And this time, she'd come prepared. The story that began with AOC calling Leavitt a little girl who should be serving coffee ended with AOC serving up social media advice. 2 organizations too small to hire real consultants, while Leavitt served in Congress. The reversal was complete, the lesson clear. In politics, as in life, substance beats style, preparation beats personality, and facts beat feelings every single time.